So I wanted to go over target priority for Genji, right? What targets should you be focusing on Genji, right? It is a complex topic, more complex than people think. A lot of the times you're just going to be seeing something like a Zenyatta. If you ask any Genji player, Zenyatta is probably like his best targets because he has no mobility, basically no way to defend himself. Sure, there was the kick change from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, so if you get too close he can just book you away, but still, Zenyatta has a really big hitbox, no mobility cooldowns, no way to like self-peel basically. So Zenyatta a lot of the times would be just like your top priority target, right? You just want to hard focus him. But it's not like you're going to all the time be wanting to focus the Zen. It depends on the situation. The first thing that you have to ask yourself is, can you get to that target? For example, this is an Overwatch 1, right? But Zen, even in his very vulnerable state, and that is before the kick, so he was more vulnerable in Overwatch 1 than he is in Overwatch 2, right? In that state, he was probably stronger and harder for you to dive as Genji than he is in Overwatch 2. Why? Because of this character. This character was insane. In Overwatch 2, it's kind of mediocre, probably the worst support right now, maybe. But like, the important thing is, Zen provides a lot of like long-term value to the team. He's a very greedy pick in the same way as Ana. Ana has two really highly valuable cooldowns. She lacks mobility, but she has a great gun, and she can make a lot of impact plays, in the same way that Zenyatta can, right? Discord Orb, lots of pressure on the enemy tank, capable of dueling characters at long range. The Harmony Orb is also really useful for characters, let's say like Tracer, like Genji. Really useful to have that. Because Zen provides this much value, if you can babysit him and slow the game down, then you can have it so Zen is going to provide you a lot of value that another character might not be providing. And that's why Brig Zen was meta in Overwatch 1 in the later years. Because Brig would babysit Zen so he wouldn't die, and then Zen would provide a lot of damage. So while Zen himself was really diveable, really weak, if you managed to get close range on him, he didn't have anything to do about it. Brig could. Brig could pocket him, Brig could stun people, boop them, provide a bunch of value and sustainability to the Zenyatta to make his pick really good. So coming back to Overwatch 2, Zenyatta might be really high priority targets and a really good prey for Genji, but that requires you to actually get close to him, because if you just try to poke him out from far, maybe you'd get to land some good damage because of his big hitbox, but he probably is not gonna die to just poke unless you can use that poke. Let's say you hit 2 shots and then you dash in, secondary fire melee and finish them. So something like an Orisa, for example. If the Orisa is playing around the Zen, now that's a little bit of a weird scenario, but if she was playing literally besides the Zen, she could just javelin spin you away, spear you away, right? Try to body block for him. I guess a better example would be D.Va, right? D.Va just flies in, 3-second matrix, now the only damage that you can deal is stuff like melee or dash, and then he can easily get peeled for and then you die in that time. Right, so target priority isn't as easy as it sounds, and that's why we're going to be going over like a lot of comps, and I'm going to be giving you the thought process of why I would choose each target, right, how I would rate each target as far as like value and also how likely you are to kill them, and then give an overall picture of what I would probably do in that match, right? And that also depends on the map that you're playing, but that's a little bit more complex. Hey, FuturePoke here with a quick message. I made 2 tier lists, one ranking all characters on how hard they are to kill as Genji, and the other on how valuable they are as a target. Tier lists are far from perfect, but with 2 different perspectives on the hero roster, as well as my thought process on target priority, I hope to provide enough information for you to get the gist of it. Now, back to the video. Let's go over the example that we got in chat, right, first. Ramattra, Sojourn, Reaper, Lucio, Kiriko. So basically the meta comp in Overwatch League, except instead of having Winston, you just have Ramattra. Ramattra is a tank, and in general, Genji doesn't really like tanks that much. He just tries to avoid them. So Ramattra probably out of the picture. But it depends, there are some situations where you as Genji might want to try to focus the tank, which I'm going to be going over after this comp. So Ramattra, no. And especially considering that Ramattra, from all the tanks, is one of the most survivable of them all. So Sojourn and Reaper, right? Reaper, interesting matchup. Sojourn, she's currently kind of broken, so you probably just always have the disadvantage, no matter if you're close range or long range or whatever, right? If you, let's say, close the gap on her, she has the disruptor shots, that deals way too much damage. Yes, I might be trying to contest the Sojourn to prevent her from doing stuff, but I'm not necessarily expecting to win duels or to be able to sustain them for a long time. So it would probably have to be some very precise plays, and I also have to consider getting close to her and also having her in a vulnerable position. Because if I get close range to her and she has slide, she can slide away, and her slide actually gets her further than my dash gets me. So yeah. Very, very niche, I would say, to actually be able to deal with the Sojourn. You have to have some specific circumstances happen, which you can play for. For example, you can try to flank and wait for her to slide to some place. Let's say she's playing low ground and you know that she's going to jump to a high ground. Then maybe you hide on that high ground, so now she jumps into you and you also have the surprise factor in her. So that could be something that you play for. But still, just kind of niche, weird. I would rate like the Reaper more highly than the Sojourn, right? So while the Sojourn I would say has a higher value, it's more realistic for me to do something about the Reaper than it is for me to do something meaningful to the Sojourn. And then we have Kiriko Lucio. Kiriko, very survivable on her own, but forcing out her cooldowns is very, very valuable, right? Especially the Suzu. Especially at the high level of play, because then you're gonna be finding yourself in scenarios where your tank expects you to have Suzu. If you have, let's say, a Hog versus Hog matchup, or just Hog playing into a Kiriko. The Hog hooks someone, you're kind of expecting your Kiriko to TP in and Suzu the hooked targets. But if you, as the Genji, force the Kiriko, let's say you flanked around and you went for her, and you forced the Suzu and then you got out. Yes, you didn't get any value yourself, you got forced out, but you forced the Suzu, and now your Hog gets a hook and can get the kill for free because they don't have Suzu. So there is some merit in going for her. She's also a support, and supports in general are high priority targets for you. But she is very survivable, and you have to keep that in mind. And she can also duel you very, very well. She also has a very, very small hitbox. Lucio, very slippery, very good self-peel and survivability in general, and he can run away from you very fast. But depending on the scenario, if he is a little bit too aggro or you just catch him off guard, you can very much go for him, because he doesn't have something like a big burst of heal. And while yes, he can be very fast, he won't always. It's like very rare that you're gonna be finding these Lucios that are like slow. You engage on them, they are low, they speed amp, and they're like zoom, they're out of there because they're gods at wall riding. So that's gonna be more niche. So a lot of the times, if the Lucio is playing like wall riding a ton, but he's a little bit too aggro and I get a few shots on them and then maybe they boop me away, I dash in, I try to finish them up with one or two more shots, and that can be a valid target. In this composition, I would say that, weirdly enough, Ramattra is out of the picture, right? The rest all have their merits. Didn't talk much about Reaper, but because he's Reaper, right? Usually he's doing stuff different from you. You're not going to be playing to mark him, and he's not going to be playing to mark you. So it's usually just like a matchup where both of you just kind of ignore each other. So I would say it's more about between Sojourn, Kiriko, and Lucio. And it's going to depend on the positioning between them. But as, let's say, the fight starts, I'm probably going to be trying to deny the Sojourn from being able to play freely. And especially I'm gonna be watching for her if she tries to go too aggro, and then I'm going to try to force her, because I don't want her to be uncontested on an aggressive position. Outside of that, I'm more so looking at pressuring the supports. That might not be a surprise to a lot of people. What might be a surprise is the fact that I think Lucio is the best target. It's not going to be all the time, obviously, but that's something that I have noticed with my most recent matches, where I feel like I'm a lot of the times opening up with a pick on the Lucio. And that also ties to a little bit to what I had been playing as, like, because I was playing, and that's more related to like the Hog meta. And Hog still hasn't been changed, but there have been some more balance changes, and I haven't been seeing that much Hog. Right now, there's been a lot more of a shift like Orisa to counter the Hog, and Ramattra being played. And then you play Orisa because Orisa has a good matchup against Roadhog and Ramattra. But in this specific scenario with the Roadhog, right? If you think about this comp and you just swap the Ramattra for the Roadhog, a lot of the times, if you, let's say, try to go for flanks as Genji, it's hard to get kills into a very backline that is very slippery and can peel everyone very easily. And then the Roadhog is just getting pressured by one less member of your team, and he gets to play for, not for free, but he has one less person trying to pressure him and prevent him from doing stuff, right? Slow him down. What I found best was to actually play with my team a little bit more, pressure the Hog a bunch, try to not let him be able to walk for free. I can deal a lot of pressure to him while not being very vulnerable, and I can purposefully let myself be more vulnerable to bait his hook, and then I deflect that, or I dash out the moment that I expect him to hook, and then I'm nullifying the value of a tank as a DPS, which is a good trade. Then, from there, I'm doing my job, really helping stop the Hog, while I'm watching opportunities elsewhere. As I talked about, the Sojourn going into aggressively, maybe the Lucio wall riding too aggressively and trying to be too proactive and doing stuff, right? Maybe the Lucio is trying to go in, boop your tank so that the Hog can get a hook and then he gets out, right? And that has been why I feel like I have been getting a lot of entry picks on Lucios in particular. And that's why I would say that maybe he would be the person that is I'm actually more likely to kill. But in this example, I'm actually kind of focusing the Hog at the start, and for as long as the enemies don't make big mistakes, right? Or something that forces me to change the way that I'm playing. Yeah, it's definitely a weird comp. Like, tanks that you don't really do that well against, very survivable characters that you don't necessarily have a good matchup against, but all of them have their merits, right? You could play to just force the Suzu, try to not let the Kiriko heal as much. That becomes especially true if you go ahead and call out to their team. I'm pressuring the Kiriko, I'm taking away their heals, I'm flanking in 3, 2, 1, and then you do a coordinated attack where your team is going in while you're hitting the enemy team from a flank, and you're forcing them to make a decision. Okay, do I, as the Kiriko, try to ignore the Genji, have the Lucio peel me, and then I can focus on keeping everyone up, or do I try to deal with the Genji, then I give up protecting my team, because I might not be able to pay attention to them because I'm fighting the Genji, right? I might even have to use cooldowns to save myself instead of my team. So that is a very, very good coordinated play, but that requires the coordination, right? And that doesn't necessarily have to be in voice chat communication. That can be just like you watch your team because you can see your team behind wall and stuff, right? You watch when your team is engaging and then you engage with them to have that coordinated pincer attack. I would say that would be like my assessment of the comp. Obviously, I'm not doing this whole thought process as I'm in the match. I'm like kind of used to it because I've played the comp so much. And also, talking about my thought process is way slower than me actually thinking this kind of stuff. So I guess the TLDR of this composition would be like, Ramattra is a no-no. And since everyone else is kind of survivable and kind of fight you off and all this kind of stuff, mostly depends on like who ends up being too aggro and making a mistake, and then you can go for them, right? And you try to play to punish these mistakes, or you just choose to, let's say, try to harass someone, let's say a support like the Kiriko or the Lucio, to try to catch the tank off guard because the tank is pushing in and expecting the support from the Kiriko and the Lucio, and then they are busy fighting you and can't support the Ramattra because they're busy fighting you and the Ramattra is just getting rolled in the front line because your team is focusing him, right? The composition that I wanted to talk about was a very weird one, but it applies in general to this specific support comp, although I will talk about it with a specific tank in mind. So this composition would be Sigma, Tracer or Sombra, Echo or Pharah, Lucio Mercy. What is the main problem with this comp? Lucio likes to speed boost the team. If you are just going to be heal botting as Lucio, you might as well pick something like Bap, Ana, Moira to provide more healing, and other types of utility that Lucio won't be able to provide, right? Unless you're like very much trying to survive, but even then Moira would just probably be better than Lucio. So Lucio, great, he's like an outstanding support because he is like the only one that can provide speed boost all the time. Kiriko can provide during the ult, but that's the ult, right? So that makes Lucio very important and very core to a lot of comps. But when you're matching Lucio and Mercy together, Mercy wants to damage boost. Mercy does not want to heal bot, because if she's heal botting, you might as well play other characters. Again, Baptiste, Ana, Kiriko, right? Lots of characters that are going to be doing that job better while providing other types of utility. So neither of these two characters want to heal bots. And if neither of them are heal botting, you have such little heals. And if both of them heal bots, then you're not getting their utility. So you're just playing a less optimal support comp than others, right? You're losing so much for no reason. That's the problem with Lucio and Mercy. They just don't work together very well. And so that problem becomes especially true when you add a flyer like Echo, like Pharah. Both of them kind of really wants the Mercy Pocket and they're very much enabled by the Mercy Pocket, right? So the Mercy probably wants to be flying with this either one of these, right? I guess that the comp I gave as an example is just one of these flyers and one of these flankers, right? So the Mercy is going to be flying with the flyer and most of the time be with them. So she's actually going to be providing the damage boost, right? If she isn't, then she's just doing probably worse than if she actually pocketed these characters. But so let's assume that she's just not heal botting, damage boosting and pocketing the flyer most of the time, right? And occasionally going around and healing people. Then what is the Lucio doing? The Lucio is probably trying to help the tank, maneuver around the battlefield, try to help him avoid damage, and occasionally diving with the flanker or helping heal them. But the Mercy is mostly going to be having to survive on her own and pocketing the flyer, and the Lucio is going to be doing everything else. So diving, peeling the tank, moving the tank around, all this kind of stuff. So, as Genji, Mercy, high value targets, but a lot of times it's a luxury to actually be able to deal with her early in the fight, right? Let's say if you kill the entire team except the Mercy, yeah, the Mercy can't do much. But early in the fight, especially with something that can fly, it's going to be hard for Genji to actually manage to get a kill on the Mercy. It's also going to be hard for the Genji to get a kill on the flyer. Lucio is slippery, I talked about that in the previous comp. Flankers, very slippery flankers that Genji doesn't have a great matchup against. Yes, you can deal with them on your own, but most of the time, even if you can sort of deal with them, they just run away and you don't actually accomplish that much. Because they just run away, you don't get a kill. So, this would be one of those rare scenarios where I would say just hard focusing the tank is actually the play. Because the tank isn't getting much heals. You can't really go for the Mercy or the flyer. You can't really go for the flanker. And you can't really go for the Lucio that well, unless the Lucio does something bad, as we talked about before. The tank is going to let you get a lot of damage consistently, and Sigma especially is a tank that you can sort of harass, because the shield you can bypass. His primary fire is kind of weird to hit, so Genji, try to hit a Genji as Sigma consistently is going to be like a really high level play. You would have to be really good at the game to be able to actually do that consistently. And it's not like he has that much burst. The only real burst that he has is with the rock, and the rock the Genji can avoid and just dash, right? And then his damage, he also has the deflect. So Genji can walk in, deflect, the moment that he sees the rock he can dash, and then he can just keep harassing the Sigma from a lot of angles, ignoring the shield, being really hard to hit, and putting a lot of pressure on him. And it's a luxury for a DPS to be able to do that much against a tank, right? And usually you wouldn't be able to do that because there would be a support to actually be able to keep the Sigma up, and the Sigma would be like, ah haha, I'm just getting support ults. Let's say a Baptiste, right? Baptiste would be a good pairing for Sigma. But in this case there isn't. There's a Lucio. If the Lucio is even in there, babysitting the Sigma instead of, let's say, helping the flankers. So he wouldn't be there all the time necessarily. Why do I say that? A character like Reaper is very interesting because he can go toe-to-toe with a lot of the tanks. As a DPS, a tank is way more valuable than a DPS, so having a DPS that can go toe-to-toe with a tank and brawl with them is very interesting. That makes them more valuable than usual. That isn't to say that Reaper is meta because of that, but in the same way that Reaper can be very valuable for this. So for example, against the Winston comp, you just pick Reaper and you play to deny the Winston from existing. Even if you don't do anything, you just exist around your team, not allowing the Winston to do much, you're doing a lot as Reaper, because you're just zoning the enemy tank out. As a DPS, you can do that in Genji versus Sigma in this specific composition. So this would be a rare scenario where I'm focusing the Sigma, most likely. Unless I'm trying to go for like clip, and then I'm probably going for the flyer or the Mercy. but that probably depends on the map. Something like Ilios, that has a lot of points where you can not only high grounds but also points where you can walk climb to get high in the air and then have the double jump and the dash to maintain your air time, right? And have time for a lot of shots. Alright, let me think of a composition here. So the Shamadra brothers, Ana Mercy, Winston. Winston you're probably trying to ignore unless he hard feeds. The support comp, Ana Mercy, Ana Zen, Mercy Zen, this kind of stuff is usually regarded as being like the better comps for Genji to play against. But it's not like it's easy targets, right? Ana has sleep, Ana has nade, Ana has good damage, right? Mercy has good survivability on her own too, and both can kill each other very well. Genji versus Genji is a weird matchup, and a lot of the times in the same way to describe Genji Reaper, you're just kind of gonna ignore the Genji. You can also just play to match Genji, but it works a little differently than Tracer versus Tracer, where Tracer just plays to mark the other Tracer. Because Genji doesn't have the same sustain that a Tracer has, or the mobility. So I feel like it's weird to just play Genji to mark the other Genji. And Hanzo. I would say that a lot of the time, as juicy as Ana might be, Hanzo is a good target. And why is Hanzo a good target? I would say that Hanzo is a good safe target. Why? Usually you just win close range against him. You obviously have to be careful with burst, but against Sniper, Widowmaker, you like going on her, so in the same way you would like to go for Hanzo. Both have their own differences, right? Their own thing, their own kits. But yeah, Genji is favored close range into them, right? And while you might not necessarily kill the Hanzo, you're forcing the Mercy to pocket him and keep him up. And that applies to a lot of Mercy pockets in general. You don't necessarily need to kill something if you are taking the attention of a lot of players. Again, going back to Tracer, is something that Tracer often does. She doesn't necessarily get kills on her own, but she sometimes is just like so annoying in the backline that if you ignore her, she just gets the kills. And if you don't ignore her, you're putting too many people giving her attention, so somewhere is lacking. So let's say that the Tracer is diving the Ana and the Mercy is peeling for the Ana and the Hanzo is trying to shoot the Tracer. Well, the poor Winston in the front line is gonna have no help. So that could be a thing that you do against any pocket, mostly. You can also just try to go for the Ana, but you have to be careful about her cooldowns that make her more survivable and also her hitbox. So that it makes her not just a free pick, it's not like a Zen or something in that composition where you would be very happy if the Mercy was pocketing the Hanzo to just jump him, because he's not gonna receive much peel, right? But yeah, Ana is a good target, even if you don't kill her, just contesting her, as any other support, cutting the heals off from the rest of the team because they're busy fighting you is interesting. But I would say, the main things would be just to avoid the Winston and the Genji. Trying to focus the Mercy is very viable, trying to focus the Ana is very viable, trying to focus the Hanzo is interesting in its own sense, and not just for the fact that it would be like one person contesting two. Maybe you're getting pockets from someone too, but it's also about preventing them from actually getting kills, because while you might not feel like you're achieving much by just contesting them and not getting a kill yourself, just preventing them from actually playing for free is good. Because let's say a Nash with a Mercy pocket that plays for free just spams so much, farms Bob, your tank can't really play the game, she's just playing queuing all the time and just winning fights off of that, or burning so much time off the clock, putting so much pressure on your team, has so much pick-off potential that it's really hard to do stuff. So if you just play to prevent her from doing these types of things for long enough, your team is actually going to have so much less pressure on them that they can play the game, because you are preventing the Ashe with a pocket to play the game by just constantly being in a position to pounce her if she tries to be too aggro or she feels too safe and she just hard scopes and doesn't move and all that kind of stuff, right? But it would be something that would be like really bad. Moira, Kiriko, Torb, May, I believe was what I said. Let's say Zarya. Not really going for the tank. Hard for you to do anything about anyone because the peel from the Zarya, the peel from the Kiriko, the peel from the Moira, both DPS have a lot of HP, they're very survivable on their own, are better than you close range, provide poke damage. That's a comp where you just kind of cry, I would say. but it's not like you can't do stuff. One of the main objectives I would say would be to starve the Zarya of energy, so she can just zone out the front line very well with a lot of charge. And then the Mei you can poke from afar. She can also hit you very hard, but it's kind of hard with the Icicle, I feel. Differently from a Hanzo, just the jumbo jumps make it weird for her to be able to land hits on you unless you're like a Mei specialist or something. Because of you click and then it charges, and then it's not like you can hold the charge and then shoot. You click and then after a certain amount of time it fires, and you have to know that time to be able to actually properly position. So it's kind of harder to hit than, let's say, a Hanzo, I would say. And also it doesn't one-shot you. Torb, similar to Mei, can't one-shot you, has a lot of spam. The turret's also annoying, but differently from Mei, if you, let's say, close the gap on him and destroy the turret, sure, he might have overload, but you're a very big threat up close, and he has a hitbox similar to Zen. So you could just go ahead, triple headshot, dash, triple headshot, and then he's basically dead, if not dead already at that point, right? So there will be a problem to actually walk up to that position, but there's something that you have to think about. Their poke can be annoying, but it's not like the best. Zarya doesn't have great range, she doesn't have bad range, but she also doesn't have great mobility. Mobility is something that the biggest damage dealers lack in their team. Kiriko has some poke, yes, but the big bursts of damage are gonna be mostly luck. The Moira can be annoying, but Moira is a character that is a skill check for Genji, right? So, and a skill check in general for the game. That's why Moira in low ranks is good and usually bad in high ranks, right? So I would say, since Mei has her cryo freeze, I would say that probably Torb is better of a target, but because of the turrets, there is this problem of the turrets for you to go for him. And for the Mei, there isn't the problem of the turrets, and you can actually poke her a little better than the Torb, but then she has the ice block. But if you can force that out, maybe you actually go for her. But then you are actually on a timer against her, right? If you engage her and you actually commit to that, the slow and everything is going to basically put you on a timer, and you have to kill her in a certain amount of time. Unlike the Torb that actually has to rely a little bit more on aim to actually go ahead and pressure you out of that close range position. But I would say I'm mostly looking to close the gap, force cooldowns, and see who screws up. Mei without ice block, Kiriko without DP or Suzu, Moira without fade or orb. Also, especially if they're out of position, right? Torb if he can destroy the turret or someone else destroys the turret and I close the gap on him. But I'm against composition like this. I'm also a lot of the time going to be heavily reliant on pathing to be able to actually get close to these characters to be effective. And if I don't get what I need done in time, I can dash out. As if I dash in and I don't get something done, which is gonna be hard if I don't actually force cooldowns and stuff, I'm probably screwed and I'm going to die. Another thing that you can try to do is just poke them to get them to a combo threshold. Again, you hit 2 shots or 1 headshot. I mean, not on the DPS because they have 250 HP, but in one of these characters, right, 200 HP, hit 2 shots or 1 headshot, and then you can dash, secondary fire, melee, and that's a kill. You don't need headshots for that, only body shots. I didn't think that I would actually go and take so long in each comp, but I guess it makes sense, right? It is a complex topic, more complex than people think. And it's good to be able to show these nuances. To like, okay, maybe on Ana Mercy it feels obvious that you want to, let's say, focus the Ana, but it might not necessarily be the thing that you want to be focusing the Ana. Or the same example of the Zen. If the Zen has a diva on the team and the diva is good with peel, Zen might feel like a very, very easy target, but he is just a trap for you to engage in, the diva to matrix him, and then you just die.